Shema Israel. Hope you enjoy this next study. My name's Dee. This is my wife, Millie.
So if you like what you see, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if you wish to reach out to us, you can email us at devotedtoyah@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, but obviously, we want to bring that up because that's the beginning of the covenants, and the whole thing we're going back to is in verse 1 of Exodus 9. It talks about that Yahuwah is the Elohim of the Hebrews, and Abraham was Hebrew, and that's where it began. But you had wanted, when we were having our side conversations earlier, you were mentioning that how are the covenants realized, and it was through prophets. And I remember you wanted to make a point that the prophets heard directly from Yahuwah who the people of God were, and there was no prophet that states it was being revoked, and Christianity would then come and come into play. Mm-hmm.
I guess basically my idea was when I look at scripture, when it comes to such an important topic like this, like I am making a covenant with a specific bloodline on the earth, and I'm going to be their God, and they're going to be my own special people. Like, this isn't something that's small. This isn't something that lasts for a year or 2 years and expires after 10 years. This is something that is long term, right? So whenever I see this topic being discussed, and what Yahuwah feels about it, or what moves he's making in a contract type language, like contract covenant kind of language, it comes through prophets. I don't really see any altering, any establishing of these types of things through people who are not prophets. Prophets were the weird, very odd, very strange people that lived on the earth that were awkward, many times lonely, because they're very weird. They hear from God audibly. They hear from Yahuwah audibly, and they speak these very difficult things. And so I said all that to say that we see the establishing of God choosing his people through prophets, okay? And we do not see this ever being revoked. The only time we get even a hint to this revoking would be Jeremiah chapter 3, which Jeremiah is a prophet. Hint, hint. Once again, he's the one that's speaking about this topic. Nobody else has the authority other than the other prophets, okay? But Jeremiah 3 is the only time we hear about a divorce where Yahuwah is actually destroying the covenant, okay? He's bringing it to an end. He is divorcing part of Israel, not all 12 tribes. He is divorcing 10 out of the 12 tribes. This is the only time we see this, and it's being done through a prophet. However, within the same book of the prophet Jeremiah, Yahuwah is saying he's going to restore that marriage covenant. He's going to restore those 10 tribes that come back into covenant. So ultimately, there is no destruction. It's only a temporary destruction. And when was that destruction of that covenant marriage restored? It was restored, as we know, through the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul breaks down why Yahusha died. He breaks it down. Romans chapter 7 is a beautiful example. It breaks down how it relates it to Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 1-4, about, if a man marries a wife and then divorces her, gives her a certificate of divorce, she goes away, marries another man, and gets divorced again, and she tries to come back to the first husband, she cannot come back to the first husband. Okay? So that would be an abomination, to Yahuwah, and that would defile the land. So what happens? If that first husband dies, that woman is no longer bound by that law, because that first husband is dead. She can't even marry that first husband either. But Romans chapter 7 makes it clear how when a husband dies, the woman is no longer bound by that law. And here's the key: the husband just didn't die, he didn't stay dead, he resurrected from the dead. Therefore, it is now the father can take back the 10 tribes of the north back into covenant without breaking the law of Deuteronomy chapter 24 verse 1 to 4. So that's something I talk about often. But my point is to say that Christians, like John MacArthur, this false teacher, I call him a false teacher because he does this when it comes to the gospel and the law. He literally, I got him on tape. I've been doing video commentary on his stuff. He literally said that God rejected and rejected Israel through Jesus Christ. That was his final rejection. And that God will reestablish Israel or deal with them as a nation again in the future. Okay, that's this demonic doctrine of dispensationalism and stuff like that they get into, they play games with. But according to the words that we just read here, according to what Ezzy had read, that God will never reject them. And also in Romans, we'll get into later, there's some scripture that supports Romans. Paul says, has God rejected his people? May it never be. Certainly not in any way, shape, or form. So I believe that's Romans chapter 11. But anyway, I think that's all I wanted to say, is that if you're going to have the guts to say that God rejected his people, you better show me your prophetic resume, that you are a prophet. Not that you just prophesied things. I want to see your resume that you are a prophet, because there's no scripture that ever says God rejected Israel and stopped dealing with Israel and is now dealing with Christianity. There's not one prophet, not one book that even alludes to that idea. So if you're preaching that, I want to see your resume and to know if you're a real prophet or not. Because if you're not a prophet, you got no business, making such extreme statements. That was my point.
Yeah, and going back off. Oh, I'm sorry, Ezzy wants to go ahead.
Yep, Ezzy.
Yeah, just I really like how you emphasized God of the Hebrews or Israel, because looking at the word, it's been a while since I've looked at words, but looking at the word Hebrew or Abri, it means one from beyond. But if you take it to the letter, the letters are it's just four letters: the ayin, the bet, the resh, and the yod. So the ayin means to see, watch, know. The bet means family, house. The resh means head, first, top, beginning. And then yod means to work, worship, throw, or hand. For me, looking at those letters, it literally means not just one from beyond, but the first to see, the first to worship, the first to work in the family. And if you can help me, there's a scripture that talks about like rebuilding the bridge or saving generations after you. When you're the first in the family to worship, you're rebuilding those bridges back to Yahuwah, or you may be the first in your family to save the next generation. So if you look at all of the prophets, if you look at Abraham, being somewhat of an outcast, he literally told him to leave his country. If you look at Jacob, versus Esau, didn't really value his birthright, whereas Jacob is. If you look at Joseph, he was literally sold, into slavery from his family. You look at Moses was one of the many Hebrews that was saved, being put on the Nile River, but later on, he literally had to flee from that home. So Yahuwah is choosing, people, like you said, that may be weird, but also outcasts, maybe from foreign lands or not from the original land. And that's literally what Hebrew means. The first in the family to see, but also like in the same way that we use alien, so to speak.
Wow. That was great. That was awesome.